That's one of the kind of core values of business, is make them dancers. So that kind of spurned from these agents parties where they've got kind of people up on the table. But the real meaning behind that is not to say that you want every client to do break dancing. It's like you've got one client that's going to be a break dancer, one that's going to be a tango dancer, one that's going to be something else. And it's to say that, I guess the analogy behind that is that every client's different. It's finding their right beat, but you want them to be dancing with you. It's part of that process and part of that journey.
Thanks so much for joining us on Space by Stansons now. I am very excited. I've got Scott Malin. I nearly called you Matt. Malin. Got Scott Malin with me here. And yeah, he's got a really interesting background from like architecture, which I always find quite fun because it's just not all in D&B. And so I'm going to pick his brains about that and obviously do the 3 projects, early memory, recent thing, and then a future wildest dreams. So Scott, thank you. Sorry, we'll get down you here. How's it going? Like, you just left Thirdway and
So I guess back end of 2024 was a bit of a whirlwind. So kind of officially leaving Thirdway at the end of this month, but kind of coming to an agreement at the back end of last year after being there for sort of nearly 6 years. So kind of bit of a broken heart to leave, but I think it's also the right time for me to kind of go and sort of see what else is out there and try something new. So just to sort of get sort of the juices flowing again, I guess.
yeah. And how's that whole job search a bit?
It's stressful. It's stressful, especially when you've got a kind of a 10-month-old baby at home. But really, like, it's, I think, rather than anything, and sort of people I've spoken to in the industry, the back end of last year, everyone's trying to get all of their ducks in a row. So I guess kind of from sort of November to the end of the year, you're kind of panicking a bit because people don't want to kind of go out and see new people. You might have a coffee with a person here or there, but there's nothing sort of really formal. But I guess coming to the new year, it's been completely different, and people have been more receptive. There's companies going through a lot of change at the moment as well, and whether that's a kind of a restructure or people have left and they're looking to replace, or they want to go down a new avenue, or there's kind of huge growth with certain things and certain sort of people we're speaking to. So it's really interesting and really kind of nice place to be, that there's options out there. And I guess for me, it's just finding that next opportunity, as we were kind of just saying, to sort of get the kind of creative juices flowing again, something to sort of like excite me and get me out of bed every morning. So yeah, to kind of watch this space.
Yeah, no, fair enough. What does excite you?
What does excite me? That's an interesting question. So I guess, I've been doing this now for 18 years or so. So this is coming from sort of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, straight out of university and joining Gensler to, like I say, just leaving Thirdway, and sort of BDG were kind of in the middle of that, as well as AFK. And everywhere I've been, it's been a completely different kind of animal.
Yeah.
So I guess coming out of university, which was great. I loved sort of university and everything that offered, and kind of worked my arse off to get a good degree at the end of it, but enjoyed myself while I was doing that as well. So joining Gensler and kind of joined just before the big financial crash, sort of in 2008. And I guess coming in there as, so Gensler at the time classed graduates as interns, very sort of American term, being an American company. In many ways, my job was safe because I was kind of the cheapest member of staff. But I remember, so when the crash happens, they went for a massive redundancy as kind of, I guess, a global sort of crash happened. And the office literally halved overnight. So this was everyone really from like senior designer up to principal level. And I remember everyone had to go through an interview process, and there were some people that really fought their case to stay. Others are maybe a bit like, okay, yeah, it's the right time. We offered a good redundancy package. But it was just a crazy time to sort of be working, and like seeing this office. So at the time we just moved from Barbican, Wood Street into Aldgate House. And at the time it was kind of a new way of working. So everyone was to open plan as opposed to cubicles that we had at Wood Street. And then you go in sort of, we would work on a Friday, come in on Monday, and then half of the desks were empty. And it was quite a sort of an eerie feeling, but it was also like a strange time that a lot of the work was in the Middle East because essentially they was the only ones that had any money. So I remember my first project was a project for Abu Dhabi Stock Exchange, and the team that I started with essentially all got made redundant. So then new people came in kind of internally, and then there was working with a Chicago-based architect who was doing the base build, kind of a lighting consultant from Germany. But I think the extensions was from France. So like proper global projects, and obviously our clients were based in Abu Dhabi. And one of the guys that run the stock exchange at the time was an Irish guy. So again, sort of two completely different cultures. And you've got not just the end user of the stock exchange, but you've got the developer of not just the new stock exchange, the new building, but the whole island. So it was an island that they were creating to be the new financial district within Abu Dhabi. So you're working on this sort of massive project. I'm like, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. But it was, I think that the benefit of working for a business like Gensler at the time was that there was a lot of people in there that knew what they were doing, obviously. And they always kind of instilled in you, ask questions. Don't just think like you can't and you just got to get on with it. And if it's wrong, you're going to get sort of bollocked. It's very much like, no, go and ask questions, be curious. And that's kind of stayed with me throughout my whole career. Like if I don't know something or if I want to ask a question, I'm not afraid to. I'm not just going to put my head down and hope I kind of get away with it. So yeah, so I spent sort of first kind of 6 years of my career at Gensler, kind of a brief stint with, it was FK, it's now AFK. So two of my bosses at the time, Simon Jackson and Matthew Cobbler, kind of set up the interiors team with this new business in London, which had strong connections to FKA in Australia. And that was working on sort of two projects simultaneously in Canada. So kind of first kind of drawn over to sort of North America in terms of work. Again, really interesting, kind of a very junior team with some sort of, so Simon and Matthew, and then a guy called Colin, who was kind of ex-Morris Smith, and then kind of went back there post AFK, working on a regional and a national headquarters in Canada, so Montreal and Toronto. So total, that was nearly 700,000 square foot with a very junior team. So it was a struggle, but it was a really sort of big learning curve at the time, being sort of the senior designer of that team.
Properly.
Yeah, and then kind of having to sort of convert from millimeters to inches, which is the nightmare as well.
I can't think of numbers that I like combine numbers. I'm like,
And then it wasn't even that, it's but the whole process as well. So obviously here, if you kind of work with a furniture dealer, that furniture dealer kind of does the whole furniture package, where this was kind of 10, 12 years ago in kind of North America, you're working with multiple dealers who supply the manufacturers. So if you've got one manufacturer, one dealer, sorry, that supplies, I don't know, Herman Miller, another one that supplies Vitra, you having to work with multiple dealers to supply all those rather than just one dealer that looks after the whole package. So that's a bit of a logistical nightmare. But again, like really sort of enjoyable, sort of 12 sort of 18 months I was there. And then the opportunity came up to join BDG, which was arguably kind of like my sort of golden era of sort of trad, I guess. And so BDG are owned by WPP.
yes.
And they're one of the original 10 that Martin Sorrell kind of when he set up WPP kind of acquired these agencies and businesses. BDG are one of the original 10. And for a while, they never really worked on WPP projects as much as they probably could have. And then a guy called Colin McGady went into BDG as creative director, eventually kind of left as chief creative officer. But he was like, there's like a real kind of gap here that we can work with WPP agency. So I guess the kind of intro to that was the project they did at Sea Containers. So that's for sort of Ogilvy. I think a couple of the Group M companies were in there, a couple of other sort of smaller agencies, but predominantly it was for Ogilvy. They were the biggest tenants. And that was a real sort of game changer for Ogilvy as a business. So they were originally over in Canary Wharf. Kind of all of the directors were in offices, still private offices. And then they had this real kind of shifts in kind of mindset. Actually, this activity-based working is the way forward. And there was kind of on the rooftops, there was sort of 2 restaurants, so Cucumber Bar and the Sunset Bar, I think it's called. So Sunset Bar was generally like where you could get breakfast and lunches, and eventually they opened up as a bar in the evenings. And Cucumber Bar was very much more around kind of private dining in and hosting events, all connected to like a huge kind of amphitheatre. And then on the roof of Sea Container, there's kind of landscaped kind of garden, again on 1 or 2 really nice days we get every year in London. It was kind of a great place to sort of go and have drinks and stuff. And it kind of like in the summer it was packed. And again, BEG moved from Clerkenwell to kind of Sea Containers as part of that kind of deal. And then that was sort of the real springboard for launching this REX program, which is real estate consolidation strategy. So I guess part of my role there was to work on those projects. So we started off on Madrid, and that was doing the architecture and the kind of interiors. So you're looking at the building that, I mean, their real estate team was unbelievable. They find these buildings, I don't know how, it's like a magic black book that they've got, which is all these amazing buildings across Europe. So the Madrid project was an old Telefonica building, but the typical floor to ceiling height was 6 meters. The sort of front elevation was like over 200 meters long. So you enter on, so 3 entrances. So the central part was the main kind of building lobby. But if you go to the west, it was like you rating on the basement. You're in, on the sort of far kind of east, you're on the first floor. So it's kind of working with those dynamics and how does the reception kind of work on sort of split levels. So we kind of work that, but you're working not just with the real estate team that are based in London to make sure that your project's on time and on budgets. You're working with the end users. So I think in Madrid, there was something like 20 odd agencies that go in there. So not only are you trying to develop a brand and a kind of an experience that kind of suits everyone with like your building reception, your kind of large conference rooms, your restaurants, your bars, and everything that's going into this space, you're then having to deal with 20 odd different personalities and what do they want from the project. And even to sort of the blocking and stacking of this space, you've got agencies that, well, we make the most money, so we should be the highest up in the stack. And then you've got others saying, we're the biggest company, we're people, so we should have the best space. And this war, there's a nightmare. And I think in Spain in particular, they maybe weren't as sort of forward thinking as, I guess, the projects in Amsterdam.
One is forward thinking.
No, and I don't know if that's a sort of cultural thing, but to the point where one of the agencies will have, well, we're not moving from our current office where we've got our own private offices as directors to working in an open plan environment. It's like that this is the strategy for WPP as a business. And I mean, luckily at that point, I kind of shifted from kind of leaving the interior side of Madrid over to Amsterdam, because when it becomes sort of engaging with the different agencies, all of those discussions are in Spanish, and I mean, I can speak English. So one of the senior designers in the team, Max, grew up in Spain, fluent Spanish speaker, so it made sense for him to kind of step up, and part of his career growth as well, to step up and actually had that engagement one-to-one sessions with every agency, whilst I then transitioned over to Amsterdam, where they're very keen, because they're sort of maybe sort of more multicultural in terms of their population of teams, to have sessions running in English. And the kind of the project sponsor locally in Amsterdam was very keen for sort of new ways of working, and very much like a business mind on saying that, well, if one agency is doing the advertising for a client, another one's doing the PR, someone's doing something else, actually having them all under one roof is so much more beneficial for our clients, that everyone needs to get on board with how we're going to sort of achieve that end goal. And again, like really great projects to be able to sort of kind of 1 week in Amsterdam, 1 week at home, 1 week in Amsterdam. It was a tough one.
And you didn't have the 10-mile car.
I mean, yeah, doing that with a baby, I don't know how people would do it, but it was a great sort of experience, and like the project teams as a whole. So colliers were PMs and QSs on the project. Furniture practice did all of the furniture. And working with furniture practice, we created like essentially like a bible of products that you could use. And then again, it was giving the end users a bit of flexibility to say, right, this is like your budget. So if we're going to go really high on your kind of lounge areas within your own demise, that means we might need to come down to where you've got your kind of T points and breakout areas in terms of sort of spec or cost. But it's giving them that flexibility to essentially design their own demise within kind of restrictions. So it wasn't just a complete free fall. And then in terms of kind of brand integration, we worked with Crenside, so they did a lot of the brand stuff at Sea Containers. So we brought them in, and then again, we hosted workshops with all the end users. So Crenside would set brief, get to understand each agency, and then as part of that, bring in their own identity into their space. So although there was fixed parameters in terms of, say, like the carpet that we used or how the meeting rooms are constructed, we still wanted them to have their own, make it feel like their own space as well. So kind of taking like a Cat 8 plus, but giving it their own spin as well. And really sort of successful pieces, and like Criticize's work. And I know you've had like Rob Fennis on the podcast as well. Obviously worked with Rob at Thirdway. The stuff that he's doing as well is to bring sort of brands and sort of culture to life within built environments. It just adds that next level of detail for these individual brands.
It was actually something that it's cropped up quite a bit, but you're touching on working with WPP, and so there's multiple agencies and also then across multiple locations in terms of countries. Yeah. Localization within globalization is like a challenge anyway. But then different brands underneath that, that's like
Kind of hurts my head, right?
Yes.
Airfields.
how do you like what was like what's the biggest challenge with that? Like that's
So I guess in terms of process,
yeah.
that was, I guess, one of the sort of the key things that kind of Colin and especially was keen to get right very early on. So in terms of how we got from kind of A to B, that process was fixed. It was like, this is how we're going to extract the right information at the right scale from the right people. But it wasn't that we created a look and feel for the kind of general areas that was then rolled out across every location as well. So every building that WPP kind of occupy across Europe is very different, like for these campuses. So for instance, there's 3.
I've been to Sea Containers, that's the only one. No, but only actually quite recently as well.
Yeah, really. So there's now 3 in London. So you've got Sea Containers, which was the OG. Then Rose Court, I think, completed last year, maybe the year before. And then opposite Rose Court is the old Financial Times building, which is kind of in the process of being finished and wrapped up now. So they're all WPP owned or occupied buildings.
Yeah, that's probably what I've been doing.
Yeah.
The most recent.
And then, for instance, so Madrid was a completely different animal to Amsterdam. So Amsterdam was, like an old 1970s building that was kind of renovated as part of this by a local developer. And the building was split into sort of 2/3 and a third. So WPP occupied 2/3, which was kind of river-ish, that or the riverside. And then the city side originally was going to be kind of a hotel, but because the developer and the landlord saw what we was doing for WPP, they actually decided to change track. So they, and at the time, sort of office rental value was going like that. So that's all, let's make a bit more money here. So they changed the whole kind of strategy for the other side of the building, become additional office space for other tenants. But then if you look at the project in the building that was kind of found in Milan, it's kind of very narrow, but it's extremely long, but split over only up 2 floors, I think. And then that Prague is then completely different to Warsaw, which is completely different to Manchester, which is completely different to Paris.
And the town are they completely different?
In terms of the actual kind of aesthetic layouts, like everything about the base build is different.
If you're like, even the build, is it?
Yeah, they're not just going out and finding a nice little shiny glass box. It's very much like, what's the best building for WPP in those areas? And then part of that was, okay, so this is the base build we're dealing with. How do we tie in an interiors that works with the base build? So it's not like, it wasn't that WPP wanted to create a kind of a prep concept in the sense that prep all looks like prep, no matter what space it's in. And part of that is then working. So some of the project was pure kind of interiors. Some of it, the architecture team of BDG were involved as well. So for instance, Madrid was new facades, new cores, the whole kind of works. Whereas Amsterdam is very much kind of an interiors focus project. So then you're looking at the local areas, the history of the building, what kind of inspiration can we take, and then developing a base kind of concept that can kind of be rolled out. And then within that, you then kind of weave in each agency's brand, what the building brand becomes. So Amsterdam, even though it's the Riviera Stadt building, it got rebranded as Amstel. So for one of the agencies, VBAT is like, that's their kind of wheelhouse. So they partnered with PDG and Criticized to develop this brand story for the building. And then Madrid, I can't remember the number of this, on Rio Rosas, the roads. And that become La Matriz. And there's a reason behind all these kind of stories. So it's making sure that each of these agencies and people that go into this space understand that actually there's no rule arching brands. I think at the time WPP kind of rebranded to like their sort of logo, kind of story as well, kind of went over on new kind of leadership sort of took over. And this whole kind of plethora of information you're trying to sort of manage. But again, I think so one of the things I enjoyed about the process was working with the likes of Colin, because he could see that kind of bigger picture, and he's privy to sort of conversations that I were kind of earlier on, sort of stuff that kind of bigger changes that happen within WPP.
Yeah.
And then he's coming on that journey. So kind of myself and Adam Charles, who's creative director as well. And now at BDG, it's bringing us on, and then the wider team, and it's kind of having all these moving parts, but trying to get to an end goal where actually you're creating these environments which allow their business to thrive. And at the time, there wasn't a global pandemic where one of the key focuses was trying to get people into the office. It was very much like, how do we make our offer for clients better? And in the process, create better environments for our staff to be able to do that.
Yeah, I love that. I've actually had a chat with Sean Simmons as well, and I find it really interesting when brands don't just take a building, but they explore the geography or the area and find actually a building that's got a story for a start, and then ties that story into their own brand story, and then you come together. It's like amazing, like magical moment where they've got the building like weaving its own story and the brand through it, and then this like incredible like kind of energy comes out of it. And like, yeah, I don't know if I ever really realized that before, how deeply like considered buildings need to be. It's not just desirable as they arrive from the external context and the language, or even the arrival experience, or 2 miles down the road, so what you will pass on the way.
I think, like, again, like, especially sort of a Thirdway, if we were sort of speaking to clients or pitching, one of the first things I ever do in sort of my own kind of process is to analyze the space that they're taking, right? So you're assessing the base build, and it's not to the extremes that, so when I was at Gensler, they had a team that specifically looked at base builds for agents and developers and kind of critique base build to say that this isn't right for tenants for X, Y, and Z. Whereas at Thirdway, a client maybe selected the building or they got 2 on a short list. So the first thing I do as that process is be to analyze the base build. So that's looking at floor plate itself. Is it just a square box? Is it kind of oblong? Is it curvy? Whatever it is. And then it's like, okay, where's your sun path? Where's the best views? What's your structural good doing? Is it raised access floor? What's your ceiling heights? And all of these things kind of help inform an initial kind of test fit or options. And we worked with a client recently where our initial thought was your shared amenities should go where you got your best views, because everybody gets to use those.
Mm-hmm.
And through various discussions, it got completely fit that actually they wanted sort of core kind of working space on that part of the floor plan. And we're thinking, that's crazy. Like, we're not doing this with any other client. Any other client would be like, no, everybody should have access to the best views. And like, the view from this particular client was like, but our staff will generally be at their kind of core working space more often than they will be in these shared amenities. So for that reason, actually, we want to give them the best views. And even then, our argument back was like, yeah, but it's a particular team or set of teams that will sit in those areas. How do you then justify to the team that's on the other side of the floor, they've got the shit views, but you don't get, like, you don't get access to the areas you go, we're just doing the kind of tour of the floor.
I'm on that side.
That's like, they just were kind of blunt, was like, we don't care, but we'll work it out. It's like, okay, we'll give you that flexibility then, like, you work out who's going there.
They get so out of politics.
Oh, exactly. I mean,
Susie gets sick by the weekend. I don't. It's not bound coming to work. I can hear it all happen.
and the thing is, I think we're able with like stuff like that, that if you put a particular team there and you've got one person be like, I ain't want to sit by the thing, I don't give a shit about the views, I just want to get on with my job. I'd rather be in the middle, so I'm closer to the tea point to grab a coffee, because I need caffeine every half an hour.
The new.
Exactly, right. So, and again, it's interesting that there's not like a one size fits all with not just projects in general, but the people with whatever client you're working with, they're all going to have their own kind of agendas, what works for them, what doesn't.
Yeah.
And again, I would say I'm naturally an introverted person, but I can't work in silent areas. It really, I can't focus. It's deadly silent. So I'd rather work somewhere that's completely buzzy. Doesn't mean I have to be in part of that buzz. But it just helps me be so much more proactive. And I think like a space like Thirdway is very good at that. That as soon as you walk through that front door, there'll be the music going, and you walk into sort of Thirdway's kind of current office, and it's gone now. But when they kind of moved into the space in Clerkenwell, it was like a huge kind of table, which again, when they had their agents parties, it was kind of like the sort of key dancing area.
The table was
That's to the point where they had to reinforce the table because one's like so many people on it, it was kind of bowed. And then you've got kind of booths on one side, kind of the main tea point. But that area is always busy. And like the main boardroom was off of that. And I think, again, they moved into that space before I was there, but fairly confident that boardroom was there for a particular purpose. And it's so when you're bringing in clients for pitches or meetings, they've got full view of Thirdway's culture and brand on show.
Is it true that they used to genuinely like their goal was to get the clients dancing on the
Yes, and it was the goal. It's one of the kind of core values of business is make them dancers, right? So that kind of spurned from these agents parties where they've got kind of people up on the table. But the real meaning behind that is it's not to say that you want every client to, I don't know, do breakdancing. It's like you've got one client that's going to be a breakdancer, one that's going to be a tango dancer, one that's going to be something else. And it's to say that, I guess the analogy behind that is that every client's different. It's finding their right beat. But you want them to be dancing with you, right? It's part of that process and part of that journey. And again, like, I think for me, coming from both sides of trad and D&B, it's the same thing that, like that kind of old analogy of people by people, right? And it's very kind of driven into sort of Thirdway that it's not just the pitch process, it's everything. Like during the duration of a project, you want it to be a great experience for your client, because when they decide to move or expand or relocate or whatever it is, you want them to be your first port of call to come back and say, we enjoyed it so much last time. You gave us a great product at the end of it. Let's do it again. I decided to kind of leave BVG and join Anomaly, who get a one Thirdway companies. People within kind of BG, within the industry, was like, oh no, you can't join dark side. I'm like, I'm not. Like, Anomaly are essentially a trad business. But in many ways, I'd say that Anomaly are kind of like a hybrid. So they have all the processes and stuff that a traditional A&D studio would have, but with the mindset of a D&B company as well. So Pete Esposito and Liam Spencer, who set up Anomaly, kind of had various conversations with Ben Gillum, you know, a Thirdway prior to setting up what was Thirdway Architecture is now Anomaly. And actually, like, the stuff that Anomaly are doing is exceptional. And
It is actually.
yeah, well, I went in there 6 years ago to sort of set up the kind of interior side of Anomaly. We had a really kind of big project in London that was going to be the springboard for kind of more projects and building the studio up. So it was a 75,000 square foot project. And the whole project and process was looking to kind of flip the sort of Reba stages on its head, to the point where when we did stages 0 to 1, we ended up having this sort of 600 plus page brief document that we created with the client. So that was only like a 6-month period. And then it came to it and it's like, okay, so we've got this document that ticks all the boxes for the real estate team within the client side. But in terms of the end user, so there was 5 brands coming under one roof, moving closer to the core part of the business in London, to their campus in London. So it's like, how do we digest 600 pages worth of information to wider team? So people that we've done our workshops with, we've done kind of surveys with, the whole kind of workplace consultancy for the process. So there was spare space at Morelands that Thirdway from required, but essentially it was an empty shell. So it was like, why don't we create an exhibition?
So how many people are you like kind of doing this 600-page brief to?
So,
or exhibition?
So in terms of the sort of core team, it was maybe like 20 people, but the business themselves, like probably maybe like a couple of thousand, maybe just under 1,000, anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000, I'd say, people.
That's quite a big window, by the way.
Because that's 6 years ago. So, but I think again, the interesting thing, similar to the WPP projects in many ways, that you've got 5 brands that are coming under one roof, staying as their own brands, but essentially under the banner of the particular brand. And then
We built this exhibition.
so we built this exhibition. So we kind of, Rob Venice was heavily involved at time as creative director of Thirdway, the project team. And there was, I think it was like 8 chapters of the brief, so that they each had their kind of own station within this exhibition space that people can meander through. And there's like various ways that we displayed it. Some of it was like recordings, and it was like key snippets that come from various meetings and kind of various discussions. One we had, there's a creators meeting table, but the chairs were toilets, because one of the comments came out at some point during those 6 months that you do your best thing from when you're on the toilet. So true. So that came into it. There was like a whole thing around wellness, and I think in one of the workshops we had, that's like, we need to like have the sleep pods that you like, I don't know, the Googles of this world have. So we constructed a whole like king size bed within a space, and then displayed the brief on a screen that was mounted to the ceiling, so people could sit there and watch it. There's all these different ways, and we had like a big event where we're working out to the whole 5 companies to come in, and we supplied like drinks and pizzas and whatever else. And then it was like, okay, this is going to be a rolling exhibition for the next 2 weeks. So people that could have made that one event would then just come, because they're interested to see what their future workspace is going to be, right? So actually having this immersive kind of experience, it showed them that they're not just going to get what the kind of the bigger part of the business has got, sort of the core kind of consultative part of the business. Actually, we're still going to keep our own identity and our own cultures and our own kind of nuances. That there's one of the businesses where every time that they won a new client, they had this like talking fish in their like breakout space. So like what you get if you want like a fishing competition, I guess. And our players like talking fish that sing in their space because they've won a new client. Says, I'm not going to take that away from you. There'll be a space somewhere within your own environment where that still happens, or allows you to work out what the next iteration of that kind of celebration is going to be. So maybe the talking fish dies with your current space, but actually you're going to have something new and exciting, but your people get to decide what that is. We're not going to determine that. We just make sure we build you an environment to allow you to do that. But then with that whole process, I've got it at sort of stage 3, and then COVID hit. So project got put on pause, unfortunately. And then as kind of many businesses, kind of there's furloughs and redundancies. And then I guess there was like a real sort of shift. So Anomaly were rebranding from Thirdway Architecture to Anomaly. And then Ben approached me to come over to the core part of the business, because they were looking to kind of target kind of bigger, I guess, sort of more complex projects. And with my experience of sort of the trad world and everything that brings, it was actually kind of a good sort of switch. And then, yeah, here we are.
I do love how that exhibition space, like to deliver I mean, who reads a 600-page brief? I don't even read a 1-page brief.
Yeah. Right. And if I saw one now, I'd just think it'd be done with AI. It would be terrible. Anyway, yeah.
So to make turn it into an exhibition, that actually immersive, I mean, it's so cliche, isn't it? But bring people on the journey. I mean, it sounds so yuck, but genuinely, like, it is true. Like, get that finding, get that emotional connection, get that kind of like feeling, like, let's get it across.
I think this is it. Like even pre-COVID, but there's all sorts of talk about like there's workspaces needs to be far more like hospitality driven now, and this and that. And even pre-COVID, like people, if you created the right culture and the right experience, people were viewing their workspaces as sort of clubhouses anyway, right? Because you spend most of your time working, like 5 days a week, typically 9 to 5. That's a huge portion of your week that you're kind of in a working environment. So you're working with colleagues, but you're socializing with them, you're collaborating with them. So you're signing up to be part of this brand or this members club for whatever brand or whatever business you work for. That's been there for like way before sort of COVID come. I just think it's more kind of elevated now, and there's more drivers on why people are kind of taking that analogy to bring people back to the office. So yeah, it was, like I say, it was an interesting kind of time at Nominee, and then moving over to Thirdway. Sort of going back to your earlier point, I actually don't think there's much difference between trade and D&B. I don't think it is the dark side or the dirty side or whatever you want to brand it. Actually, I think you can be maybe a bit more dynamic within the D&B industry because of the nature of the beast. And I think, especially over the past maybe 5 or 10 years, that gap in terms of the output is drastically kind of gone, if not completely separated. I think some of the work that you see the D&B sort of companies now producing is exceptional. It's right up there with the kind of the traditional kind of Genslers and HLWs and TP Bennett's as well. That it's, yeah, I don't think that what used to be the kind of the dark side of our industry, I don't think it's there anymore. I think as long as the client is getting a great experience in terms of from kind of say pitch through to completion and then beyond, it doesn't matter which way they go.
I was actually chatting to someone about it not that long ago, probably this week. And it was quite interesting that we feel like workspace is almost a little bit too, it is too insular. Like D&B, we just work with D&B people, maybe a few trad people come in like you, but it's all kind of workspace, but there's not really much coming in from like fashion or retail design or residential design or even graphic design. But someone like Rob, like bringing like different, it's still designs, it's still understanding like emotions and how people, and I do get it, like people say workspace is very different, is furniture sizes and regulations. I get it, but that's like technical stuff that can be like the creative kind of bit that can't be taught, and almost having a different aspect when you come from a different side, different histories. Probably, I reckon it's undervalued, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I think that it's like really like key part of it is taking inspiration from other industries and stuff. And fashion is kind of always at the forefront of kind of cyclical design, right? So what was in fashion 30 years ago is now back in fashion.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think there maybe is an element of that should happen within what we do as an industry, because even if you take people coming back into the office, they're, especially on the kind of back end of COVID, if you've got someone that's maybe got medical conditions or whatever, like social, like anxiety or a kind of neurodivergent, they maybe don't want to come back into that environment that they had before. It's kind of open plan. Everyone's kind of accessible to everybody. Actually, they might want kind of something a bit more cellular in their approach, or whether that's kind of corporates or kind of offices or whatever it is. And I think it's getting under the skin of what people actually really, really want, that it's not pre-describing this is what we're seeing as a trend within our industry, you should adopt it. Actually, every brand is different that you work for, and within that, there's people within that business that are going to be completely different. Again, we worked with a client a couple of years ago where one of their members of IT, who's obviously in a very much forward-facing role that kind of worked for their help desk, she suffered with massive like anxiety and needed a space to break away so she can kind of clear her head and get where their current space didn't afford her to do that. She was literally just on the help desk all day, every day. People come out of my laptop's not working, or can you sort the phone out, whatever it is. And she didn't get a break from it. And it's like, actually, she needs that space where she can go away, reset for 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is, and then come back and fulfill their role maybe to a better level than she could if she's just doing that kind of consistently.
Yeah. No, it's great, valuable points. It's not a one size fits all. It's a brand, and you've got to kick out what's important to that brand. But right now, an already exciting point, because you're like about to do your next move, which ties in really nicely. Wildest dream, money, no objects. If you could do anything right now and just completely crazy, what would you do?
So I kind of been thinking about that question since you got posed it to me last week. And actually, I was super, super close to doing that project at Thirdway, maybe, was it last year or the year before? So the business at the time that we were working with or kind of pitching for was Until. So I'm not sure if you know Until.
So that's a nice brand.
Yeah. So as a brand and as an offering, it's something that's completely different to anything else in the market. So Alex and Vishal, that kind of set up the business, essentially it's co-working, but for kind of health professionals.
Yeah.
So they've, in their kind of various kind of spaces that they've got across town, they've got kind of state-of-the-art gyms. It's not just for kind of PTs, there'll be therapists there. So what's the best therapy room that you can create? Therapy suite. I think even now they've got kind of dental as well. So it's like, what does that look like? So what it is not that anybody can go in and use their gym. They're not creating the Virgin Active or a nicer version of Virgin Active. It's essentially it's a space where these PTs that are maybe being kind of screwed over working for kind of the bigger brands of kind of that industry can set up their own kind of business, bring in their clients and use that gym space.
Oh God, yeah.
And then the same for kind of therapists or dentists or whatever it is. And then they've got co-working space alongside that. So they offer kind of business coaching and these other elements. So we kind of, after their kind of first space launched, myself and Ben Gilliam had a kind of tour of the space, and they were looking at kind of a couple of other kind of spaces at the time, so kind of next venues. So unfortunately we lost out, but it was just such kind of an interesting brand to kind of be, even kind of having kind of like, we pitched them, but we had like a few sessions with them. Really kind of interesting to get their kind of take on why they've done it and what they kind of see for the future. So it's not to say that I want to work on Until's projects. It's to say, what's the next Until out there? What's the next brand that's going to pop up that's doing something completely different to change their kind of industry? And being able to work with a brand like that, I think is super, super exciting. And again, that could be that it's a professional service firm that are going to go about, I don't know, the legal in a completely different way, or a tech company that are creating the next version of AI or whatever that could be. Mm-hmm. They're kind of at the forefront of that. So what does their workspace look like to facilitate them to do that? So that's like a dream. It's just like, what's something completely different, and then hopefully that means that they can do something completely different with their workspace in turn.
You know, it's a great dream. I love Until. I just love how they have kind of taken something. So, I mean, PT is not so much, but some of their areas like dentistry and stuff is quite clinical, and like therapy and stuff like that. It's seriously, we are affected by the spaces and the objects we live with. And so if you're going in for any of that type of thing, if you're in a super comfortable environment, it's going to make a huge impact in terms of your results. So I love what they're doing, and yeah, keeping an eye out for the next one is massive.
Yeah, completely. Like I mean, just as a brand in general, like if anyone watching this is a PT that wants to get away from their norm, not just to plug Until because I'm here, but again, it's such an interesting a proposition, what they're offering people. And like I say, if there's in any kind of industry or any kind of walk of life, there's someone that's kind of keen to do something new and different, give me a call.
Kid. And one last question before we go, because I'm conscious of time. What's a book or podcast you're loving at the moment?
Well, obviously, Space by Stansons is great. But other than that, but no, I guess kind of one of the books I read recently. I say recently, I'm not a massive book one by any stretch, but last time I was on holiday, I read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, so the owner and creator of Nike. And it's a really interesting book from where he kind of started to where he's kind of taken the business. And it's, even the way it's written kind of more like a fictional kind of story. But essentially it's his memoirs. And it just shows you, like, don't let anyone tell you, basically the kind of key message from the book is, don't let anyone tell you how you should do things. That he had kind of banks telling him he should go a different way because they wouldn't give him his money if he didn't have enough product in stock. But it's like, well, if I don't sell product, I won't have money to pay you back, etc. And even like how he comes up with the brand itself. And when he was working, so at the time it was like Adidas, like a big running shoe, and he was kind of working with I think it's on Simpa, the Japanese brand, kind of like Mizuno, I think Bruce Lee wore. So he kind of then brings that into America for a company called Blue Ribbon. And it kind of completely diversifies, and yeah, it's just really kind of interesting about how he then comes up with like Nike and the people he brings in to kind of set up the business. And again, it kind of then leads on to like the Air film, which is about how kind of how they get Michael Jordan all these books. And the create about the Air Jordans. Again, we'll go with feet today. Yeah, it's just really interesting. But it's not new by any stretch, but if anyone's not ready, I highly recommend it.
Good, then. Thanks for the recommendation, Scott. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening in, hearing us. Definitely keep the feedback coming because it makes a massive difference, honestly. And the ratings, they're really helping out with the rankings and everything. So keep up the good work, guys. Thank you. And thanks again.
So thank you.
Great to chat and hear your story.
Cheers.
Thank you.